Hey, Saber Interactive has responded to fans regarding allegations of the game being woke. Also, Saber confirms there's a new update tomorrow. Not only that, they've denied rumors about Space Marine 3, discussed sharing tag animation ideas with game developers, and there's much more we'll cover in today's video. Please support the channel by hitting the like button below, and if you haven't already, subscribe by tapping the red button below as well. First off, if you don't know already, the community staff member over on the Focus Entertainment Discord has confirmed this right here, and they wrote, Space Marine 2 servers will undergo a maintenance tomorrow at 9 a.m. UTC, 11 a.m. CET, 5 a.m. ET, and should last an hour. Disconnects can be experienced. It aims at preparing our upcoming patch, which will release tomorrow. Thank you for your patience. Yep, this update is arriving tomorrow, and I'm excited to see what they've done. Perhaps we'll see improved performance, fewer connection issues, and hopefully some quality of life changes. Although I'm pretty sure there's not going to be anything revolving around that, because in the last Space Marine 2 video, we know that the developers are not inclined to pretty much bring us any quality of life updates just yet, because they'd rather figure out some of the bigger issues and bigger problems. But anyways, I plan on covering everything about the patch tomorrow, so make sure you're following this channel. Let's now address the rumors about the game being woke. For those who are out of the loop, there are quite a few players speculating that the game is all about the woke agenda, mainly because of how the Space Marine 2 characters are diverse. On X, one user posted an image about receiving a comment questioning if the game's developers are intentionally moving in this direction. The creative director, mocap veteran, responded to this post and gave some insight on what exactly went on behind the scenes. He wrote this in response. Just to be clear, it was not written by a trans woman. Ashley assisted for a short time before being moved to another project. Myself, Craig Sherman, Randy Bagel, and Maddie Garcia Dunn wrote the game. As for diversity, Ultramar has 500 worlds in it. Now that's diversity. This being said, I know many players in general are tired of being pushed in that direction, and I totally agree. However, Space Marine 2, at least for me, didn't seem to go that way at all, and it still doesn't. Regarding the diversity of characters, I didn't even notice it or think it was a big deal at the time, and again, I still don't think it is. I've played games like the very first Gears of War, which was released in 2006, and that game also featured a variety of diverse characters like Dom, Cole, and, well, I could mention more. Anyway, at the time, at least as a kid, I didn't care. I thought all of them were awesome. And yeah, it's crazy to think Space Marine 2 is considered woke, which, personally, I don't believe it is. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on this. I'm interested. Now, how about we discuss the rumors about Space Marine 3? Is Saber Interactive planning to abandon Space Marine 2? No, that's not their plans for the time being. The CCO did mention something on IGN, which we'll get to. But the creative director right here has actually denied these rumors and explained basically the reason, which often relates to the resource-intensive demand from players. The full response can be seen here, where the creative director responded to a player and wrote, "You honestly have nothing to worry about. SM3 comes up just because some requests are really resource-intensive, and it's important to distinguish between what can be done in the space of months versus years. We're all focused on SM2 for the foreseeable future." There's been a lot of players assuming they would move on as soon as possible, but that doesn't seem to be the case since the team is focused on Space Marine 2 for the foreseeable future as mentioned. We know they still have plans to release a Horde mode among other features mentioned in the roadmap, so it's clear they have intentions to continue supporting SM2. We just didn't know if their plans were long-term. Plus, the first Space Marine was released back in 2011, though it was developed by a different studio. I still think it'll be quite some time before we see a Space Marine 3, considering the developers have updated World War Z Aftermath recently, with mocap veteran reposting the announcement saying, "For those who wonder if Saber supports their games long-term post-launch." So yeah, it's safe to assume they plan to support the game for a while. Now, the CCO, on the other hand, did have a conversation with IGN, and he wrote this right here. Our game director, Dmitry Grigorenko, has proposed some story ideas that could either be DLC or a sequel. Then the CCO continued on to say, "We're literally just catching our breath. This is 2 weeks out. We just need to get the dust to settle, but I can confidently say that we will not disappoint our Warhammer fans in the future. It's too big of a success. I know that's an obvious thing to say, but hopefully we'll be working on Space Marine content for a long time." So as you can tell, they have plans to continue support in Space Marine 2, but they also have some storylines that they could potentially throw into Space Marine 3. So it's kind of up in the air on what we're going to receive. On a different note, the developers do not have plans to increase the player cap for Horde mode. The creative director replied to a player on X who mentioned it would be cool to see an extra player slot. His response was, "We don't currently have plans to increase player cap. More players means more enemies, means more processing, etc, etc. Please do submit your request for this feature via Focus website." Alright, the idea of increasing the cap does sound appealing. Having another teammate in Horde mode would be pretty fun. This is something I'd like to see, but evidently they do not have plans to increase the player count, as it would require some additional processing. Do you think this is a miss? Or should the developers consider opening up another spot for a 4th player? Let me know. Before we continue, if you're wondering if there's an exact date for the Horde mode release beyond what's indicated in the roadmap for 2025, a player asked if they have a specific date in mind, and Oliver responded by saying, "No exact dates yet, but Focus will keep everyone updated once we have specific info. Once there's word about the release date, I'll make sure to let you all know as soon as possible." Next, the creative director recently created a post inviting any kind of questions. This was posted about a week ago when he made this request. Yet a player asked him if there were any plans to add more chapter symbols on the right shoulder for us Deathwatch players. His response was that they do have plans to support all chapters. The proof can be seen here, where he wrote, "We plan to support all chapters in the end. I agree, would be great to be a Dark Angel Deathwatch Marine." Soon enough, there will be more design options available. We just need to give the developers at Saber Interactive enough time to cook. And I'm sure we'll see more designs and everything else they have in store for us. I'm looking forward to seeing new armor, the Horde mode, and so much more. So far, I appreciate that they're providing some great communication and are open to all sorts of feedback. Speaking of feedback, they recently received a suggestion regarding tag team animations for Elite and mini bosses, asking if this was something they might implement. Oliver responded to the players saying he would suggest this to the game director at Saber Interactive. The comment can be seen here, where he wrote, "That is a superb idea. We don't have plans for it, but I like it a lot. We'll discuss with game director. Maybe at some point down the road, we'll be able to see a tag team animation. I'd like to see more animations or different ones than the ones we currently have for both Terminus and even the Chaos Marines." Some of you might disagree with me on this and might take it as an offense, but please don't. It's not meant to be derogatory. However, it can be kind of repetitive seeing the same executing animation, so having more than just one would be really cool to see. Like for instance, you could stick a pistol close up to the head of a Terminator and blow the whole top portion off, or use the chainsaw sword in a different way to finish the Terminator. Something different to it. And I get it, you can technically use the chainsaw as a finisher, but I'm just talking about more ways of doing it. Moving along, there's another suggestion that the creative director will relay to the game director. Another player suggested a feature allowing players to customize the bot loadouts in PvE. For instance, if you're in operation modes, you would be able to customize the bots, choosing their class rather than having the game predetermine it for you, which I like this a lot, and so did the creative director Oliver, because he wrote back and said, "That's a very cool idea. I'll pass that on to the game director." So there's the evidence that he plans to relay that suggested idea, and it might be something we could see implemented in the future if they decide this suggestion is worth pursuing. I definitely think it's worth it, especially for players who prefer playing solo. I like the idea a lot and would like to see that as an option at some point. Maybe if it's possible, they'll be able to do that when they implement the private lobbies. Since I brought up private lobbies, there's something somewhat related to lobbies. Some competitive players are unhappy that their kills might be stolen by another teammate. Oliver responded to a player about this specific issue when the player wrote, "My friend has been getting mad at me in multiplayer PvP about me stealing his kills when he does most of the damage, but I shoot once and take the kill. Will there ever be a future where assists will count as kills if somebody does 75-90% damage but doesn't take the last shot?" The creative director responded back saying he's unsure and will discuss it with the game director, so there's a possibility we might see some changes in PvP, though it's unclear where this ranks to the priority list, right? Perhaps they have plans to focus on something else instead, setting the PvP adjustments aside so that Saber Interactive developers can concentrate on more crucial features for Space Marine 2. I'm not as competitive as most, although I do get excited to perform my best in a round. That said, I don't think implementing a PvP change like this is urgent right now. You might feel differently about it, but that's what I think. On a related note regarding PvP, do the developers have any plans to introduce older maps to Space Marine 2, similar to what games like Call of Duty, Halo, Gears of War, and others have done in the past? The developers might consider this because Oliver, the creative director, suggested it could happen, though he couldn't promise anything. However, he did mention that new PvP maps will be coming. Right here he wrote, "I mean, anything is possible, but it would require a huge revamp to fit the new game. Can't promise anything, I'm afraid. Whatever maps do come will be very cool, I can guarantee that." I really like this idea of bringing back older maps because they can alter them to look different from their original design. Of course, since the original maps were created by a different studio, it would certainly be interesting to see what they could do to add their own unique flavor to them. They could show how much time has passed by showing degradation in the map's appearance or adding more details to specific areas. Overall, that's a great suggestion, so it's possible we'll see some older maps redesigned, but for sure they have plans to introduce new maps sometime down the road. Now that we've talked about new maps, older maps, some suggestions, what about adding a new weapon like a Pyreblaster, which essentially is a flamethrower in Warhammer? Technically, it's not new, but it would be for most of you. The answer to this is both no and yes. It's mainly because the developers need to adhere to the intellectual property, but the good news is that they will consider it moving forward. Here's some more context where Oliver responds to this player on X and said, "Thanks so much for your kind words. As for the Pyreblaster for Heavy, there are certain restrictions we have to abide by from an IP standpoint, but we will look at all of this going forward. Thanks." I feel like they can't go wrong by reintroducing a weapon like that, but they do have to follow the rules, which makes sense. Hopefully there's some leeway they can utilize to introduce a new weapon like that. The only issue is, once they give the Heavy class a new weapon, they'll have to do the same for all the other classes, right? Or else some fans might feel neglected with their preferred class, which makes a lot of sense too, right? Continuing forward, another question I saw was about the possibility of seeing a class that allows us to have guns on our wrists. You can see the question here, and the director replied with, "These weapons are specific to certain armor classes or characters. The ones used by Calgar are called the Gauntlets of Ultramarines, and only Calgar can use them. There are a lot of Warhammer 40k specific restrictions we have to abide by." This right here applies to many aspects within Space Marine 2 that the devs at Saber Interactive must agree to. They can't just introduce a random class or a weapon that attaches to our wrists. It simply wouldn't be feasible. I'm sure they could do it, but they can't for specific reasons. For some of you, this might be disappointing to hear, but that's just how it goes. They take the Warhammer lore seriously, as they should. Not only that, Oliver also responded to another question about Chaos PvE, essentially stating that it would require a significant amount of work due to voice lines, animation, and balancing. The question can be seen here, where the creative director also replied with, "Thank you so much. I've heard a lot of requests for Chaos PvE. It would be a huge undertaking needing proper voiceover, animations, and balancing, not to mention a loyalist opponent, so we need to think hard about resources first. I agree it would be great though." This right here is probably one of the most suggested ideas I've seen recently, and I'd like to see it implemented as well. The issue is that it's quite demanding for them currently due to resources and the amount of work required to ensure everything functions properly. Obviously, if they rush something like this, it's bound to have bugs, so the game has numerous intricate pieces that need to work together. Rushing it would be detrimental, and yeah, it will take them some time if they decide to proceed down that path. Last but not least, if you guys are experiencing some issues with crashing or performance or whatever it is, this right here, this user basically said that he's experiencing a lot of loading screens and would like it if they could basically tone it down a bit. This right here is what Oliver said in response. "Thanks for this. We would always try and reduce these kind of screens wherever possible. Any improvements we are able to make would be applied to future patches, so stay tuned. Glad you're enjoying the game." So who knows what the update will pertain tomorrow. They could have some less loading screens, they could have some bugs fixed, or whatever the case is. But again, I plan on covering all of that tomorrow, so make sure you are subscribed. With all the information being said, this is your Space Marine 2 news. If you guys would like to be featured in the next video, all you have to do is leave a comment down below, because we're going to go over the top 3 comments from the previous video. The first comment is by Still a Solid 2D. "Literally don't give a F about customization options in the campaign. What a weird thing to be upset about." No kidding, right? This comment right here is referring to the last video about how some players were upset about no campaign customizations. The next comment is by Revelation9125. Not gonna lie, all I really want is Titus Deathwatch armor set. And last but not least, we have Chris Tatum 6688. Saber Interactive, fix the servers and let us customize the bots we take in and have them level up with us, and my life is yours. Those right there are the top 3 comments from the last video. If you guys would like to be featured in the next one, all you have to do is comment down below and you will be featured in tomorrow's video. Thank you all for the support, and I'll see you guys in the next one.